I'm sure it's nothing to do with your question.
Well, hopefully not.
It certainly wasn't triggered by me. The word institutionalized is deliberate because what it demonstrates is the failure of the institution. So that there was, as you'll see in the report, a clinical assistant who oversaw the prescriptions for 12 years. This clinical assistant, her practice was known to the consultants who did not check and stop what she was doing. The nurses who had a responsibility, a duty of care to the patients, knew the doses that they were being asked to administer. And they too could have challenged the doctor, but didn't, and carried on administering. The pharmacist who was responsible for providing those opioids did not seek to restrain their use. And when some nurses did complain in 1991 to the institution, to the hospital senior managers, they were not heeded. And so it was the institution, as well as individuals, who it would seem to us were furthering this practice. And that's why we call it an institutionalized practice. The nurses would know what they were being asked to administer, and the nurses would be seeing the effect. And as we show in the report, I think it's 59% of those who were given the diamorphine were dead within 2 days, and I think 71% of those who were given diamorphine with midazolam and hyoscine were also dead within 2 days. So the doctors and the clinical assistant and the nurses were aware of the effect of the doses that they were administering. And that's why we describe it as an institutionalized practice. It is clear to us that those doses were not clinically justified. So my colleagues, the clinicians on the panel, have analyzed all these cases and have been able to say that it wasn't justified to prescribe and administer that particular dose of that particular medication for that particular condition. In our report, we found no evidence in the documents that there was any collusion, but certainly the authorities appeared from the documents to put their own interest, their own reputation above the interests of those who are asking the questions. And I have to say that even this morning I've received an email through my own website with somebody alleging that this has happened in another hospital to a relative of them. So I think it does raise the question, but again, the panel is not competent to answer what the extent of this may be throughout the country. We are dealing with concerns related to historic cases and not to the present day. And again, we have no authority to comment on the quality of care, but this is very much an historic investigation. But we have visited the hospital, the panel, and we were received very warmly. And it was very good to be able to move around the hospital freely and to ask questions. And there was no resistance whatsoever. Quite the contrary, a great willingness to work together with the panel. And you asked earlier about parallels with the Hillsborough Independent Panel. I know that for some of the families who've spoken with me honestly, they said that it was only with that panel report that they felt that they began to grieve, some over 25 years later. And I think this is true of the Gosport families. There were lots of tears this morning. There were people grieving. And a word that I think people should be extremely cautious about is closure. I wrote about this in the preface to my report on the patronizing disposition of unaccountable power, saying that, there is no closure to love, no closure to the love you've had for somebody you've lost, and added that grief actually is a journey without destination.